Welcome to Nobody Told Me. I'm Jan Black.
And I'm Laura Owens. Our guest on this episode is someone we've wanted to have on for a long time because we really admire her wisdom and insight on life, creativity, innovation, and entrepreneurship. Our guest is Stanford Engineering School professor Tina Seelig, author of 17 books, including the international bestseller and one of my personal favorites, What I Wish I Knew When I Was 20.
Tina was trained as a neuroscientist and has always been interested in how we think, especially how we come up with bold new ideas. Her TED Talk on the little risks you can take to increase your luck has had close to 2.5 million views. Tina, thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
You have been called one of the most creative and inspiring teachers at Stanford. People love your books. They love your TED Talk. And I'm wondering, how did you acquire the wisdom and insight that so many of us want to learn from?
Well, that's a very interesting question. It's obviously, the topic is very, very interesting to me. I have been fascinated by creative problem solving for many, many years, and having the opportunity to teach classes on this topic allows me also to learn a lot about it. So every course I teach, I stretch myself as well as the students.
You know, Tina, like we mentioned in our intro, you have this wildly popular TED Talk, and the basis of it is that luck is rarely a lightning strike and is more like a wind that blows constantly. What do you mean by that?
Right. I really love this metaphor that, we think that luck is something that happens to us, but I really believe that luck is something we can create and that we can catch, that there are opportunities to be lucky all the time, and that every single day there is this wind that's blowing, and you have to build a sail to catch the luck that's actually in your environment. And it has to do with paying attention to things that other people might not see, learning something new each day, meeting someone new. Each of these things you do increases the chance that you're going to be luckier.
And you also say that you feel people need to have a healthy disregard for the impossible. Why is that?
Well, oftentimes it's the things that seem crazy or impossible that actually end up being the most interesting things, the most interesting opportunities. If you look around and you look at the companies, the ventures, the products that have changed our lives and that we count on every single day, when they were developed, when they were in their infancy, people thought they were crazy ideas. And so being willing to entertain the possibility that an idea might work is really, really important, even if on the surface it sounds kind of nutty.
So you've guided all of these students over the years as they transition from school into the real world. And I would think that most of them have these gigantic dreams, which usually involve making big money, but you don't really even know the first step as to how to get there. What do you tell them?
Well, so you made an assumption that people's big dreams are to make a lot of money. And honestly, my experience is that people want to have a really positive impact on the world. Yes, it's nice to be able to support your family along the way, but having an impact and making the world a better place is also just as important. In fact, if you were at my office here, you would see that we have a big sign painted on the wall that says, "Entrepreneurs do much more than imaginable with much less that seems possible." And that doesn't say anything about money. It says something about seeing possibilities and then leveraging the resources around you to bring those ideas to life. And so that's what people really want to do, and that's what we teach in our classes, is the knowledge, the skills, and the mindsets that are needed to actually do this.
So what do you say to someone who comes to you as a young student at Stanford who says, I really want to make my place in the world? Where do you begin?
Well, it all starts with need finding. It starts with engaging in the world around you, seeing the problems that are there, and figuring out how you might address them. I do this in a lot of my classes, and in fact, last night I was meeting and teaching a group of faculty members who are all doctors who are trying to solve problems at the medical school, at the hospital. And each of them had, observations about things that are problems in their world. And so it doesn't matter what you're doing, whether you're starting a media company or a medical tech company, there are always opportunities. And so it starts with understanding need finding. And it's really a skill that can be learned. And then it goes on after that to figure out how do you actually frame a problem in a really meaningful way. And this sounds easier than it really is. The problem that you state is actually the frame into which the answers will fall. Now, does that make sense? So, for example, if I said I'm going to plan a birthday party, the assumption is it's a party. If I said it was going to be a birthday celebration, all of a sudden we've opened up the frame of possibilities. Or if I said, let's find a way to mark your birthday, that's a very different set of solutions, right? So the way you ask a question dramatically shifts the type of solutions you come up with. And so we go from need finding to framing the problem to then ideation. How do you come up with a huge number of possible solutions? In fact, I always have my students come up with at least 100 solutions. They think sometimes that's a typo. But it's 100 solutions. And then they start playing with these ideas and seeing which ones are really realistic.
So you talk a lot about the brainstorming process. What is the right way to go about doing that? And I know you say that you need to come up with 100 ideas, but does that just involve writing those down as, random ideas that come to you, or does it need to be more thoughtful than that?
Gosh, I run entire courses on brainstorming. Brainstorming is really interesting. People think it's a very simple thing, but brainstorming is actually a skill. I compare brainstorming to playing chess. Lots of people know how to set up a chessboard or how the pieces move, but very few people are chess masters. And the same thing is true with brainstorming. Brainstorming is quite easy from a rules perspective. The rules are pretty straightforward and easy to recite. But actually doing them is quite challenging, and there are lots of strategies, just like chess, that allow you to be successful. So, for example, we say there are no bad ideas in brainstorming. Well, that's easy to say, but it's super hard to do. If you see an idea, hear my idea, and you think it's really stupid, it takes a lot of work and a lot of training to be able to actually build on that idea and consider that idea, even if your initial reaction is negative.
Wow. Tell us a little bit more about that, about what goes into successful brainstorming and how we can do it in our own lives, in our own workplaces.
Well, there's some potholes people fall into. One is the question of who's in the room. Mm-hmm. You often scoop up the people who you work with and say, oh, let's brainstorm. And it turns into just another meeting. But if you really want to brainstorm, you have to put a lot of thought into the activity before you even start. You want to think about framing the problem correctly. So we talked about that a minute ago, really thinking deeply about that. You want to make sure you have people in the room who have very different points of view. Each brainstorm is only as good as the brains in the room. And so, for example, if you're designing a brand new car, you don't just want people who are going to design the car and build the car and sell the car. You might want people who are going to drive the car. Maybe you want people who don't drive the car, who are going to sit in the back seat of the car. Maybe it's kids. Maybe you want people who don't drive at all, like people who ride bicycles. Or maybe you want people who make rocket ships or submarines, people who bring a very different perspective to the table. Each one of these different perspectives opens up the door to lots of really fresh possibilities. So that's another example that you want to think about who's in the room, what question you're asking. You want to think about the space you're in. The space really matters. And there's some interesting things that influence the space, even the height of the ceiling. The higher the ceiling, the more generative the ideas. Think about if you go into a cathedral that has really high ceilings, you feel quite differently than if you're in a room that feels very boxed in. And the types of ideas you can generate in a different space really is quite different.
Yeah, and I know you've talked about mood and its relation to brainstorming. I'm wondering how much of a difference it makes if you're in a good mood when you're brainstorming, and if there's a certain time of day that's best for people to do that, if it's actually in the morning when you're fresh, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, different people are going to be fresh at different times of the day, right? Some people are morning people, some are, night people. So that might be very particular to the individuals. It really is interesting that done well, brainstorming, I believe, almost reverses depression. It makes you feel like you're in a good mood. Because think about it. If I said to you, hey, that's a really good idea, how are you going to feel?
Fantastic.
You're going to feel great.
Yeah.
You're going to feel great, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And if I say, well, that's a really good question, you're going to sit up straighter and say, wow, I had a really good question. Well, that happens again and again in a good brainstorming session, is that people are validating your ideas and building on them. And if you don't feel good, if you don't feel a little bit taller when you walk out of a brainstorming session, you probably haven't done it very well.
Now, what about colors in a room if you're in a brainstorming session? Are there some colors that are better, that invigorate people more in terms of brainstorming than others?
I'm not an expert on that, and I do know it's certainly important, the colors, but I would say that having windows with natural light, or even being outside, is really generative. Having natural light is really, really a very positive stimulant for brainstorming. So having high ceilings, natural light. You also want to have lots of space to capture your ideas. If you're in a room where you've got a little tiny whiteboard or a chalkboard, as soon as you fill up that board, you're going to say, we're done. But if the whole room is filled with whiteboards, or you can put Post-its on the walls or the windows, pretty soon you're filling the whole space with ideas.
We thank you so much for joining us on Nobody Told Me. And we have a question for you to think about. Is there something that interferes with your happiness or is preventing you from achieving your goals? BetterHelp Online Counseling is there for you.
BetterHelp allows you to connect with a professional counselor in a safe and private environment. Get help on your own time and at your own pace. You can schedule secure video or phone sessions, plus chat and text with your therapist.
BetterHelp has 3,000 licensed professional counselors in the U.S. who specialize in depression, stress, anxiety, relationships, sleeping, and trauma, anger, family conflicts, LGBT matters, grief, and self-esteem are just some of the issues you might want to discuss.
And of course, anything you share is completely confidential. And if you're not happy with your counselor for any reason, you can request a new one at any time at no additional charge.
BetterHelp is available worldwide, and you can start communicating by text, chat, phone, or video in under 24 hours. Financial aid is available for those who qualify.
It's secure, convenient, and professional. And best of all, it's a truly affordable option. Nobody Told Me listeners get 10% off their first month with discount code NOBODY.
So why not get started today? Go to betterhelp.com/nobody. Simply fill out a questionnaire to help them assess your needs and get matched with a counselor you'll love.
That's betterhelp.com/nobody. Why is follow your passion an incomplete message? It's something that I feel like with my generation, I'm 28, and I feel like I was always told to follow my passion, but I totally understand why you think that's incomplete.
Now, it's super easy for someone to say, follow your passion. And, that's only one piece of the puzzle. I mean, knowing what your passion is also a little bit difficult for a lot of people. And the reason is that before something is your passion, it's something you don't know anything about. I mean, think of all the things you're doing, like hosting a podcast or a radio program. Before you knew anything about this, you had no idea that you would be good at it or would be passionate about it. And so for young people, the goal should really be to try lots of things and see what works, see what you're good at, see what you love to do, see what there's a market for. And I think that's the point, is that there are three pieces of the puzzle. There's, yes, what excites you, but also what you're really good at. I mean, I might be really excited about music, but if I can't carry a tune, that's going to not bode very well for me. So understanding what you're really good at and what you can get better at, what you're excited about, and also what people might be willing to pay you to do. If people aren't willing to pay you for it, but you're still passionate about it and good at it, that might be a hobby. And it's super great to have hobbies. We all should have hobbies, but understanding that it might take a tremendous amount more work to turn it into a career is really, really important.
Because you work with Stanford University students every day, I'm really wondering what your observations are in terms of the fears and the challenges they face today compared to what was faced when you began work at Stanford years ago.
The major difference between now and 20 years ago is when I started working at Stanford is that the context continues to change. The economy, the relationship we have with technology, the people who are role models continues to shift. And so the world that the students are in is changing so fast that the students are responding. I'm thinking back to 9/11. Well, I run, along with my colleagues, a fellowship program for undergraduates on entrepreneurial leadership. And the program runs from spring, summer, and fall. So we had a group of students who had been with us in the fall of 2001, spring of 2001. And then during the summer, they worked in startup companies. And then they came back in the fall. Well, on September 11th, we all know what happened. We started school a couple of weeks later. It was as if they were totally different students. The world had changed overnight, and so did the students. And so I see that in all aspects of our lives here on campus, is that as the world changes, the students change. The economic crisis in 2008 changed everybody. The types of aspirations the students had, the types of jobs they wanted to take, the skills they wanted to learn were quite different after that economic meltdown.
And what do you tell them in terms of how to go with the flow when there are these big changes?
Well, one of the things that's important is that, change opens up opportunities. Often the most interesting and successful companies get founded during downturns. They're started during times when, it's really a difficult time to run a business. And a lot of people are laid off. It means you can hire people for less money. You can rent office space at a lower cost. You can raise money a lot easier because there are fewer people competing for it. So it's really important to understand that every shift opens up the door to new possibilities.
But why is it so hard sometimes to view problems as opportunities and bad times as opportunities?
So much of that is one's mindset and the stories we tell about who we are and the possibilities that exist for us. And therefore, if we can start shifting the stories we tell, we can start seeing the opportunities that we might not have seen before. There are always people in the world who are creating interesting opportunities. We can look at them for inspiration and ask them, hey, how did you see that opportunity when I didn't see it? And it was probably because they had a story that they were telling about looking at the world as opportunity rich and full of possibilities.
I like how you have your students write a resume of failures. Can you explain why that might be important for people to do?
Sure. It's something that's actually gained a lot of traction recently, and I think it's fascinating. I think there was even a New York Times article this week about someone writing failure resumes. The idea is that if we're only celebrating our successes, we're missing the opportunity to actively learn from the things that didn't work out as we hoped. I'm a big believer in looking at failure as data. And as a scientist, when things don't work out as you expect, you say, wow, that's interesting. What happened there? And you might find that you've discovered something really exciting and new that you didn't expect. And so if you do that with your own life, you end up learning much more quickly. If you say, wow, even today, I said something I shouldn't have said. I don't want to do that again. And if you write it down and keep a resume of those lessons, you essentially codify them, you formalize them, you learn them better, and you're much less likely to repeat them.
And what then is your best advice along those lines for someone to recover from what they perceive as a failure? Maybe they got fired from a job or didn't get hired for the job that they wanted or didn't get into the school that they wanted.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I do an exercise with my students where I have them do a whole workshop around failure and resilience. And one of the questions I ask is, what is the bottom made of when you fail? When you hit bottom, what's the bottom made of? And some people say, oh my gosh, it's rubber or a trampoline and I bounce right back. And other people say, oh my God, it's boiling lava or shards of glass or a black hole that I can't get out of. And the people who believe that the bottom for them is made out of a trampoline, they recover much more quickly than those people who fall into a burning pit of lava. And so if you can change that story about what you think happens, it's funny because I'm the kind of person who takes a lot of risks, mostly social risks. And, I'm willing to say something or do something or ask for something that might seem a little bit bold. And then I have to remind myself, what's the worst that can happen? Okay, someone might say no. I might be a little embarrassed. Something might happen that's little, you know what? It's worth my asking, where someone else might be too afraid even to venture into that topic.
We're so glad you're part of the Nobody Told Me family, and we wanted to let you know more about one of our sponsors, Zola.com. If you or a friend or relative need to plan a wedding, then you owe it to yourself to check out Zola.com. I wish Zola had been around to help me with wedding planning when I got married.
Zola is the wedding company that's reinventing the wedding planning and registry experience. Zola takes the stress out of wedding planning with free wedding websites, your dream wedding registry, affordable save the dates and invitations, and easy-to-use planning tools.
Get started by creating a free wedding website in just minutes at Zola.com. Choose from over 100 wedding website designs and find the one that suits your style and your type of wedding.
You can put your Zola registry on your wedding website so guests can get all the details they need and buy your wedding gift in one convenient and beautiful place.
The Zola store has the widest selection of gifts at all different price points. There's something for every guest to give. Guests love free shipping and returns, price matching, and more.
So to start your free wedding website and also get $50 off your registry on Zola, go to Zola.com/nobodytoldme.
Again, to start your free wedding website and also get $50 off your registry on Zola, go to Zola.com/nobodytoldme.
I feel like I'm somebody who sees all problems that come up as black and white and probably only having one solution, maybe two solutions. What advice would you have for getting me to see the gray area of these problems and seeing maybe three solutions?
Oh, my goodness. I want you to see 300 solutions. No,
I do too.
But how do you get there?
Give yourself a challenge. I mean, if I said to you, come up with 500 flavors of ice cream, the first 100 are going to be expected. Chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, spumoni, pistachio, chocolate chip. You're going to keep going. And at some point, you're going to start coming up with some really interesting ideas. And this is really, really important. If you only come up with a couple of solutions, they're probably going to be incremental and expected. But if you really push yourself, you're going to come up with things that are really surprising and much more innovative.
What advice do you have for someone with low self-esteem?
Again, low self-esteem is an inside job. I used to be such a nervous person. I used to be afraid of everything. I mean, and nobody could probably believe that right now. Sometimes I pinch myself and say, how did I become so brave? I used to have stage fright. I used to be worried about getting on an airplane. And you know what you do? You take little tiny risks that get you out of your comfort zone, and you see, wow, that didn't hurt. I started talking to the person in the elevator. That didn't hurt. I met someone new. Or you start, I'm going to read about something I don't know anything about. Wow, I learned something new. Try something, ask a question, raise your hand, invest some money, something that you're not going to die if you lose it. And you start getting more and more comfortable taking different types of risks.
And I also love what you say about appreciation and how important it is to express that, because I think that can actually help with your self-esteem. I think you show somebody that you appreciate them, they reciprocate, and then you, in turn, raise your self-esteem.
Yeah, I completely agree. I am a huge believer. I am a thank you note queen. At the end of every day, I go through my calendar and look at all the people I met with and send a thank you note. You should expect a thank you note from me later today, by the way.
Oh, good.
Thanking you for interviewing me on your podcast. Because, if you don't show appreciation to other people, you haven't appropriately closed the loop. And so many people do things for you, and they could have been spending that time on themselves or for someone else. And if you don't take the time to appreciate them, it's very unlikely that they're going to do something for you again. And here's the point. You're not going to understand. You're going to ask them for a favor in the future, and they'll just happen to be busy. Whereas the person who said thank you and how appreciative they are, if you reach out to them again in the future, it's much more likely that they're going to say yes.
We mentioned that we are big fans of your book, which is an international bestseller, What I Wish I Knew When I Was 20. What are some of the things that you wish you'd known?
Oh, my goodness. There's so many things, right? I wrote a whole book about it.
Exactly.
I'm super excited. I don't know if you know, but I have a 10-year edition of the book coming out in just a couple of months. I've been working on updating the whole book, and in early May, the new edition is going to be coming out. So I'm really, really excited. It's got a lot of fresh stories and new content. Essentially, the overall theme of the book, both the original and 10-year edition, is that we really should challenge assumptions about what's possible in our life. We should look at most rules as recommendations, that we can make our own luck, and that we essentially can carve a path to the future we want. And I give lots and lots of examples of how you do that and how you build the skills and the mindset to make that happen.
And you also wrote an article called What I Wish I Knew When I Was 40. How are those things different than What I Wish I Knew When I Was 20?
You did your homework. You know, at 40, you're in a really different place in the world. At 20, you have tons, sort of a wide open space of what you can do. 40, it's the same, but people often feel really locked in, and they don't feel the same flexibility of what they can accomplish. And one of the things I talk about in that article is that you can start anywhere, no matter where you are in your life, no matter where you are in the world. It's like jumping into a swimming pool. You can start anywhere and start swimming, and you can get to your destination. You don't have to worry that you're at a place in your life where you feel like things are locked down. There are people who reinvent themselves at many different ages. In fact, right, I'm a professor at Stanford now. At 40 years old, I was not working at Stanford. I had no idea what I was going to do next, and I was a bit lost in my life. Yes, I had graduate training. Yes, I had done some things, but I was, I had a 10-year-old kid. I wanted to go back to work. I didn't quite exactly know what direction. It wasn't that I started my job at Stanford at 41, and I came in a relatively junior position and worked hard, looked for opportunities, and made my own luck. In fact, I tell people all the time, when you get a job, you are not getting that job. You're getting the keys to the building. Mm-hmm. And I really internalized that lesson for myself and essentially said, where are the white spaces? Where are the holes? Where are the problems that need to get solved? And honestly, 13 years after I started in a relatively junior staff position, I ended up becoming a full-time professor.
And it's really interesting because I got your book before I was 20. I remember specifically going to the bookstore with my mom and getting this book. And I just thought to myself that 20 seemed like it was old at the time, and I really needed to have life figured out. And I look back, and I guess it's been 10 years, and I wish I could write a book now called What I Wish I Knew When I Was 20, because you do learn so much even within the span of the 10 years. You just gain a lot of wisdom as you go through different phases throughout your life.
Well, it's true. In fact, I ask people at 90 what they wish they knew at 80. It's really interesting because I am fascinated with the fact that we never stop growing, we never stop learning, and that's what makes life so interesting. Is that you can reinvent yourself, but you can also completely rethink just your place in the world as you move through life.
Tina, who do you admire? Who are your role models?
Oh, my goodness. It's so interesting. I'm not kind of a hero worshiper, but I look around and I just am so impressed with my students. The enthusiasm, the energy, the creativity that they bring to the problems. I wish that I had been as fortunate as they are in terms of the experiences that they've had. I think back to when I was a kid and I was interested in neuroscience. I had no resources to learn about the topic. The kids today are so fortunate. They get access to so much information at their fingertips. If you're curious about anything, you can dive in. So it's not as much role models as being inspired by people who are young and trying to emulate their level of curiosity and passion.
And along those lines, Tina, what advice would you have for somebody who wants to become an entrepreneur and doesn't know very much about how to get into building their own business and being an innovator, but has all of these online resources available at their disposal?
Yeah, so I'm give a little plug for our lecture series. We have a podcast called it's our Entrepreneurial Thought Leader Lecture Series, and every single Wednesday we have a different, really interesting, high-profile entrepreneur or investor or philanthropist or author come in, and it's easy to find at ecorner.stanford.edu. They're free. If you're on campus, they're open to the public. And there are people who say they've gotten an entire education about entrepreneurship by listening to them, these podcasts, and watching the videos.
Tina, our show is called Nobody Told Me, and we always ask our guests, what is your nobody told me lesson? So what is it about life or about business or teaching or whatever it might be that you kind of had to learn the hard way that you wish someone had told you?
Well, first, I wish I really fully understand when I was young that it was really up to me to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I got lots and lots of lessons, from my parents about what I was expected to be doing, and there was very much a right answer. And it took me a long time to gain the confidence that, that was a really nice recommendation, but that I was really responsible for carving my own path. The other thing is that most rules are recommendations. When people tell you, here's how you get into college, or here's how you make a movie, or here's how you run for office, for political office, these are sort of tried and true ways, but there are lots of other ways. I've never gotten a job in the traditional way. I've never gotten into school a traditional way. I've always found that there are ways to get to your goal that are non-traditional. For example, where are you guys located?
San Francisco.
Okay. I'm just down the road, in Palo Alto, right? So if I said, how are you going to get, from San Francisco to Palo Alto? Take the freeway. But if the freeway is blocked for some reason, there are lots of other ways we can get that distance, right? Mm-hmm. And we could maybe take the train, or we could go out to the coast and we could take a boat. We could figure out some other route to get up to San Francisco or down here if we really, really wanted to do it. And I think it's important to know that if you really set your mind to something, you can make a path to your destination, even if the obvious paths are blocked.
And how can people connect with you online and learn more about this special 10th anniversary edition of What I Wish I Knew When I Was 20?
Great. I love having Twitter followers, and I post lots of interesting articles and resources and information there. And it's just at T Seelig, that's TSEELIG, so at Twitter. And I'm super easy to find. I have a website also, tinaseelig.com, and people can go there for all sorts of resources.
And Tina, we thank you so much for joining us. This has been so much fun.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Our thanks to our guest, Stanford Engineering School professor Tina Seelig, author of 17 books, including the international bestseller, What I Wish I Knew When I Was 20. Her website is tinaseelig.com. I'm Jan Black.
And I'm Laura Owens.
You're listening to Nobody Told Me. Thank you so much for joining us.